How you doing back there?
You know, last time I was in a vehicle driven like this, I was being shot at.
I wouldn't want you to be homesick for the Army.
Never thought I'd be this happy to be back in Queens.
What, you've never been shot at in Queens?
Uncle Ben! Call an ambulance!
How did we get here? Why is Sony Pictures making movies about Spider-Man villains but with no Spider-Man? And it's not just Spider-Man's rogues gallery either. Obscure side characters like Madam Web are getting their own movie. But why? And why do they keep hinting at the prospect that someday, eventually, Spider-Man's going to show up in one of these things?
More and more films. Obviously, we've got Venom and Silver and Black as well. And they're sort of not in the MCU as such, but can we see him?
Well, they are tangential because they take place in the world that this Spider-Man lives in.
I mean, obviously, at some point, those worlds are going to collide big time. They are. I mean, if we are so lucky as to make more Venom movies.
That I can't wait. Is it part of the MCU? Can you say? Like
yes.
The Avengers world?
Yes.
Oh man, that's going to be exciting.
Tom Hardy cast as the evil you.
The sad thing is that he won't be part of the MCU. He'll be part of some Sony universe.
To understand how we got here, we got to go back to the 90s. In the world we live in today, Marvel's large roster of characters are iconic, mostly due, of course, to the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, before the MCU, Marvel was primarily known as a comic book publisher, which at the time wasn't great because the whole comic book industry was going through a market crash. With stocks low and being $610 million in debt, Marvel filed for bankruptcy in December of 1996. In an effort to stay afloat, Marvel sold off their film and television rights to their most popular characters. Enter Sony Pictures. At first, Marvel had offered Sony every single one of their characters for the low price of $25 million. Knowing how much these characters are worth today, especially with how much some of them rank in at the box office, $25 million is a drop in the bucket. Unfortunately for Sony, their hindsight was not 20/20, and they didn't take Marvel up on the initial offer. In fact, an executive at Sony Pictures was quoted as saying, "Nobody gives a shit about the other Marvel characters," and then proceeded to exclusively buy the film and television rights of Spider-Man for $7 million. In defense of Sony's decision at the time, they were kind of right. Not that many people knew who Iron Man was before 2008, but most people knew who Spider-Man was. And so, Sony Pictures bought the character and began production for Spider-Man's silver screen debut. With Sam Raimi of Evil Dead fame set to direct and Tobey Maguire casted as Peter Parker, the first major Spider-Man blockbuster hit theaters in the US on May 3rd, 2002. And it was a massive success. Sony then, of course, greenlit Spider-Man 2, which was another huge success and is actually still helmed by many today as not only the best Spider-Man movie, but the best superhero movie ever. Spider-Man 3 is greenlit, and though it is considered the worst in the Raimi trilogy, it actually ended up being the most profitable. After the continued success of Spider-Man 3, Sony had planned to produce a fourth installment, but then something strange happened. 3 years after the release of Spider-Man 3, Sony announces that they're canceling the fourth installment and that they will instead be rebooting the character with an all-new director and cast with a release window set for 2012. Sony was rebooting their biggest franchise in what many would consider, at least at the time, a short time frame. Spider-Man was and still is Sony's most lucrative franchise, so why would they reboot the character instead of going with a much safer option and making a Spider-Man 4, especially since it was already in pre-production? Well, one major factor was because Sam Raimi left. Sony gave Raimi the release date of May 6, 2011. And Raimi was reported as saying that he wasn't going to be able to make Sony's deadline without making major compromises to the film. According to Collider, another reason for why Raimi left was also due to Sony pushing Raimi to make Spider-Man 4 a 3D movie. The whole 3D fad is something that seems to come and go every other decade, and while it was gaining popularity again during Spider-Man 4's pre-production, Raimi had no experience filming in that format. With Sam Raimi leaving Spider-Man 4, instead of hiring a new director, Sony opted to reboot with a script already written, a contingency plan that Sony always had at the ready, because as it turns out, in accordance to the contract that Sony signed with Marvel back in the 90s, Sony has to release a Spider-Man movie every 5 years, or else the movie rights revert back to Marvel. So, instead of paying for the increased budget for Spider-Man 4 and giving Raimi that extra year to cook, Sony went with the cheaper alternative, and that's why Spider-Man was rebooted only 5 years after Spider-Man 3. So here we are in the timeline. The Amazing Spider-Man starring Andrew Garfield releases in the summer of 2012. Though audiences may have felt it odd that there was already a new guy playing Spider-Man, people still came and saw the movie. So even though it didn't do as well as the previous Spider-Man movies, The Amazing Spider-Man was still a success. 2 years later, and Sony releases The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Another success. 2 more years later, and we get The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Except we don't. because The Amazing Spider-Man 3 doesn't exist. Sony again reboots the character for a third time in 2017. This time it was only 3 years after the last one, so what happened now? Well, here's the thing. Every single Spider-Man movie has made bank for Sony. However, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was the lowest earning Spider-Man movie for the studio. It was also critically panned as the worst Spider-Man movie until Far From Home came out. Simultaneously, while the Amazing Spider-Man movies were being made, the MCU was going strong, getting bigger and bigger with each movie. Though Marvel had sold the film and television rights to their most popular characters back in the 90s, Spider-Man being bought by Sony, X-Men being bought by 20th Century Fox, and Hulk being bought by Universal, Marvel still retained the rights to most of its characters, and when they were financially able, made their own movies in-house. From there, Disney swoops in and buys a studio to add to their empire, and the plan of producing multiple different superhero movies that are all interconnected, with each movie adding to an overarching narrative that will lead to a giant team-up film, well, we all know how that turned out. Since general audiences know Spider-Man as like a Marvel character, fans were begging and probably expecting Spider-Man to show up in the MCU. The only reason why he hadn't was because, well, Marvel Studios didn't own the film rights. They legally couldn't put him in there. With an underwhelming performance by The Amazing Spider-Man 2, fans begging for Spider-Man to show up in the MCU, and an internal email leak at Sony that I'll get into shortly, Sony contacts Marvel with the prospect of a new deal. After some negotiations, the new agreed upon deal would allow Marvel Studios to produce Spider-Man movies so that this third iteration could be in the MCU. There were talks and a push by Sony to just have Andrew Garfield continue his Spider-Man into the MCU, but Marvel declined. Okay, so Sony Pictures still retained the film rights for Spider-Man, but now both studios would share a cut of the profit made from these new Spider-Man movies, while Marvel still receives all the funds from movies where Spider-Man is playing a small role or cameo. This deal worked out great, as Spider-Man Homecoming made a ton of money at the box office, and the benefit of having Spider-Man show up in other Marvel projects definitely boosted ticket sales for those movies. This deal, however, wasn't forever. It only encompassed Spider-Man showing up in 3 other Marvel projects and 2 mainline movies. So after the release of the second movie in this third reboot, Spider-Man Far From Home, both studios had to come back to the negotiating table. After some public back and forth, Sony and Marvel came to another deal, which at the time of recording we actually don't know much about. All we can say for sure is that the current deal led to the making of Spider-Man No Way Home. The idea of having all 3 generations of Spider-Man fighting alongside each other was going to print money no matter the quality of the movie, which if you're asking me, well, I could make a whole nother video on why I didn't like that movie, but my opinion doesn't matter. Because as it stands, Spider-Man No Way Home is the most successful Spider-Man movie to date, ranking in almost $2 billion at the box office, cementing Spider-Man No Way Home as the 7th highest grossing movie of all time. And there is currently a 4th Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland in development. Apparently there's also rumors that maybe Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire might also still be in development. I don't know, man. Dude, Tobey Maguire could be 80, and Spider-Man fans would still beg for him to be in spandex. Now, whenever I'm talking about Spider-Man 4, I have to clarify which Spider-Man actor I'm referring to when talking about it. With how successful Spider-Man in the MCU has been for Marvel and Sony, they'll probably keep the deal going for as long as possible. Sony retains the rights, but Marvel gets to make the movies. So, why did Sony make a Madam Web movie? Now we have to talk about Sony's Spider-Man spin-off movie universe. Okay, so when Sony bought the film and television rights to Spider-Man, they also bought all the characters associated with Spider-Man. This includes family, friends, villains, co-workers, all of it. After the first deal between Sony and Marvel was settled, Sony didn't just stop making Spider-Man movies. In 2018, Sony Animations produced Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the first ever animated Spider-Man movie, as well as the first Spider-Man movie to follow Miles Morales instead of Peter Parker. Into the Spider-Verse releases to critical praise, and though it grossed a lot less than what a live-action Spider-Man movie typically would, Into the Spider-Verse is an overall success for Sony. In the same year, Sony releases their first Spider-Man spin-off movie, Venom, starring Tom Hardy. Sony has been trying to make a Venom movie since like Spider-Man 3, so they've been trying to give this black goo monster his own movie for a while. However, what was odd about Venom and the Spider-Man spin-off movies that would precede it, these spin-off movies had a complete absence of Spider-Man. Venom is a well-known Spider-Man villain whose origins is directly caused by Spider-Man himself, but the Venom movies have next to nothing to do with him. What made it even more confusing was trying to figure out if these movies took place in the MCU. Sony producer Amy Pascal had this to say when asked if these Spider-Man spin-off movies take place in the same universe.
Well, those movies will all take place in the world that we are now creating for Peter Parker. I mean, there'll be adjuncts to it. They may be different locations, but it will still all be in the same world, and they will be connected to each other as well.
So there is a chance that Tom Holland as Spider-Man will pop up somewhere over there?
Chance.
The sad thing is that he won't be part of the MCU. He'll be part of some Sony universe.
This interview was done before the multiverse bullshit that Marvel's doing now, so being told that a popular beloved character's villain is getting their own spin-off movie with no connection to the popular character that said villain derives their origin from, though the popular character is already established in a different set of movies, in a different universe, but won't show up in their own villain's spin-off, but might show up maybe later? I'm not saying you can't make a Spider-Man villain movie without Spider-Man, especially for a character as popular as Venom, but it's definitely an odd choice. It did eventually get less confusing when in the sequel Venom Let There Be Carnage, the post-credits scene shows Venom being teleported to the MCU, which finally confirmed that these spin-off movies aren't in the same universe as the MCU, but if Tom Holland's Spider-Man is going to interact with these spin-off characters, then some universe jumping would need to happen first. Okay, so Sony is making these Spider-Man spin-off movies with the plan to have them clash with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but then why is it that when Venom teleported to the MCU at the end of Let There Be Carnage, implying a face-off was going to finally happen, why was it by the time No Way Home released, at the end of that movie, Venom is immediately teleported back to his own universe? Why hint at a Spider-Man vs. Venom movie, then immediately chicken out? In fact, why make these spin-offs at all? Back before Sony teamed up with Marvel and was still making the Amazing Spider-Man movies, a massive email leak revealed Sony's plan to make an expansive cinematic universe around Spider-Man. When you try to make a cinematic universe around one superhero, even if he is like the most popular one, it's not going to take long for you to start scraping the bottom of the barrel. This is why, and no joke when I say this, but a spin-off movie that was being discussed internally at Sony was an Aunt May movie. Apparently it would have been some kind of espionage movie following Aunt May's younger years. Listen, I'm someone who believes most ideas can work if executed properly, but this is Sony we're talking about, so that Aunt May movie, woof, that would have been awful. And we know this because if we fast forward today, the prophecy was fulfilled. Instead of Aunt May, though, we got Madam Web, a character that really only Spider-Man fans know because of the 90s cartoon and maybe that one video game, Shattered Dimensions. I'd wager that even though there's been a Spider-Man movie every couple years from Marvel Studios, those movies don't fulfill the contract obligation by Sony of making their own Spider-Man movie every 5 years. This, plus greed, has led to Sony dusting off the spin-off ideas they were going to initially do with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and instead are going to try to do it with Tom Holland's. Except, Tom Holland's Spider-Man hasn't been in any of these. So why is that? In the marketing for Morbius, there were hints to all 3 iterations of Spider-Man. The Oscorp logo from Garfield's universe, Vulture from the MCU, and Maguire's Spider-Man being plastered all over this alleyway. By the way, this poster of the Raimi suit isn't even from the Raimi trilogy, it's a screen cap from the Spider-Man PS4 game. Not that it matters, because once Morbius came out, the references to Andrew's and Tobey's universe were scrubbed from the actual release. My guess is that Sony's in some kind of limbo. They either can't, or at the very least, haven't decided on what Spider-Man to use in their spin-off universe. It's the only thing that explains why Spider-Man, even if integral to these characters, isn't even mentioned. Alright, is it time? I think it's time. I gotta talk about Madam Web. You don't need clairvoyance to know that Madam Web is a bad movie. First, these Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies have been bad from the start. Venom has its fans, but I don't think anyone thinks it's a good movie. Morbius was so bad that it was memed into oblivion. The memes were so rampant online that Sony duped themselves into re-releasing the movie again in theaters with the expectation that people would now actually go and see it. They didn't. Second, the marketing. The trailer for Madam Web is pretty bad. Listen, I like Billie Eilish, but her music is definitely being overused in trailers.
What do you want from me? Why I'm just scared of the why do you care for me?
What makes someone a criminal? Getting caught.
Duh.
In the trailer, her music is edited over some incoherent scenes with some laughably bad line delivery from Dakota Johnson.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Typically, movie studios will give their films 3 trailers to market, a teaser trailer, and 2 official trailers, but not Madam Web. Madam Web only got one trailer. I have literally never seen a major blockbuster movie studio, especially one that's marketing a superhero movie, only release 1 trailer. And that's because, well, typically movie studios, when they've just spent like $80 million on their superhero movie that's starring recognizable talent, you usually try to promote that by using trailers for, showing the movie's good parts. With how bad this movie turned out, I wouldn't be surprised if Sony opted into not paying the marketing team to make more trailers. Granted, maybe this trailer was the best the marketing team could come up with, and it still sucks. Though I'll give the marketing team some credit, they certainly tried whatever they could. Whenever I would scroll through Instagram, I kept seeing this one interview with Sydney Sweeney where she talked about how she begged the production crew to let her drop down from the ceiling like a spider because that's what her character did in the comics or something.
Drop from the ceiling because that's just what Julia would have done. They have a lot of photos of me just hanging upside down.
I can definitely see why the marketing team used this as promotional material because at least it feels like Sydney Sweeney cares.
I scavenged for every single comic that Julia appeared in, and I bought all of them, and I just went home and I read everything I could. I was so excited.
But if you watch interviews or clips of Dakota Johnson promoting the movie, it's let's just say it's a different vibe.
Can you name the 3 Spider-Man Tom Holland movies?
Yeah. Spider-Man, here he comes.
Here he comes,
That's number 1.
Yep.
Spider-Man, and he's back. And the other one, the last one is the Goblet of Spider-Man.
What's next for Cassie Webb?
What was the first movie based on a Marvel character, feature-length movie?
Iron Man?
That's what everybody would say, so don't feel bad. But it was Howard the Duck. So I just got to give it when you go to...
Howard the Duck?
Genuinely, how are you doing today?
I'm exhausted.
Spider-Man movie, 20 years old, the MCU, 16 years old. Was that something you looked to want to be a part of, to be part of that sort of universe?
No.
I kind of love how much she just doesn't give a shit. This isn't me levying criticism of Dakota Johnson, by the way. If you feel as if your movie that you signed on for was drastically changed during production and is now turned into like some sort of dumpster fire, the least you can do is have fun, especially if the marketing team's going to make her do stuff like this.
I know that when you see Madam Web, you're going to love it. In fact, I think you're going to see it twice.
And that brings us to number 3, the review embargo. It's almost a guarantee that whenever a movie studio doesn't lift their review embargo till the day of release, it's because the movie's gonna be really bad. There's probably a few exceptions to this rule, but usually studios, if they're confident in their movie, will want reviewers to see the movie as soon as possible so that they can help spread the word. But not Sony, not for Madam Web. The review embargo was withheld until Valentine's Day, which was the day of release. And as you should expect, the reviews came in, and yeah, critics have Madam Web at a whopping 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 1.5 stars on Letterboxd, and a 3.9 on IMDb. With scores like these, that puts Madam Web alongside other superhero movie classics such as Batman and Robin, Fan 4 Stick, and Catwoman. And for the final reason for why everyone should have known this was going to be a stinker. Who the fuck asked for a Madam Web movie? A Spider-Woman movie? I could see that. A Black Cat movie? I could see. Hell, I could even see a Silver Sable movie being asked for. But a movie about Madam Web? Listen, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I've consumed a lot of Spider-Man media in my life. Who at Sony saw the 90s Spider-Man cartoon and thought, yes, let's make a movie about the disabled blind old woman who is mainly like a guide for Peter? Does Madam Web have like a huge role in the comics that I'm not aware of? Is she actually like really popular and I'm just being ignorant? As weird as it was to make a Venom movie without Spider-Man, at least Venom has the excuse of being incredibly popular. Well, whatever the case, it doesn't matter now. The movie's out, people have watched it, everyone knows it's bad, everyone's bashed on it, and now it's my turn. The movie starts with some very heavy-handed exposition.
I agreed to provide security for you because I thought you were close to finding the spider.
Dead specimens show that the peptides in the spider's venom, they've supercharged their cellular structure.
That spider can give superhuman strength and power like Las Arañas.
Las Arañas, the mythical spider people who run across the treetops and punish evil men with their black poison touch.
Not even 2 minutes in, the movie feels the need to spoon-feed the audience information. What's even more baffling is that you can totally tell that Tahar Rahim's lines are 80-yard.
I agreed to provide security for you because I thought you were close to finding the spider.
Almost all of Tahar Rahim's lines sound exactly like this.
Okay. You have no idea of the torment and torture of dying over and over again.
ADR is a fundamental component to most movies. There are a lot of shots in movies where sneaking in a microphone is more trouble than it's worth, so usually you have actors re-record their lines later in a booth for the editor to match in post. If you know what you're doing, this process should be seamless. What makes this so baffling is that most of his scenes are ones where you could easily sneak a microphone in. They should have been able to pick up his lines crystal clear. Hell, even with the re-recordings they did later, it shouldn't sound this amateur.
I didn't know we'd be targeting teenagers.
They're teenagers now, but in the future, they have powers, and they will try to destroy me. I came from nothing, less than nothing. I will not give up everything I've built and have my life cut short.
It mostly just leaves you wondering, like, why are so many of Tahar Rahim's lines ADR'd? It's almost like this was originally a different movie, and Sony needed to Frankenstein it into something it wasn't. Cassie's mom finds a spider that she's been looking for, and as soon as she does, Ezekiel immediately starts blasting.
Something so small, you have so much power.
There's no attempt to like try and steal the spider discreetly. Dude literally just starts dropping bodies. He tells her you can just walk away, implying that he's willing to let her go, but like, why? I mean, I know why. The script needs her to be alive for the story to happen, but it doesn't make sense why Ezekiel doesn't just shoot her. Instead of shooting her, he gets into a tussle to try to grab the spider, which just leads to him shooting her anyways. After he does, he runs away. Conveniently, Cassie's mom wasn't shot in the belly or anywhere that would immediately kill her. Then these goofy-looking,
Las arañas?
people show up and take Cassie's mom to a cave with a pool that's filled with something questionable. The spider people put Cassie's mom in the pool and they use one of their spiders to bite her. Okay, what the actual fuck is happening in this scene?
She will come back when she needs answers, and when she does, I will be here for her.
Okay, so the spider people took Cassie's mom to this cave, presumably to save her life, which is why they have the spider bite her. The spider is supposed to supercharge the cells or some bullshit, but it doesn't work. She dies. But while she was dying, she gave birth? Okay, the spider bite is what gives Cassie her powers later on in the movie. We know this because Ezekiel has similar powers from what we can only assume is a bite from his own spider that he stole. So then, what was this pool for? Based off the dialogue from this guy, it's implied that maybe they weren't trying to save Cassie's mom's life and just wanted to bestow powers onto her unborn child? I mean, obviously from what we can tell, Cassie's mom is very pregnant and is probably very close to her due date. But like, how soon was this? Was she like a week away from going into labor? And if that's not the case and she wasn't due for a while, the only conclusion I can come to is like, was the cum pool used to make her give birth early? What was the scene? And why is there a white guy speaking perfect English part of the group of spider people? Aren't these people supposed to be indigenous to the Amazon? And how does he know that this baby's gonna grow up and return back here someday?
She will come back when she needs answers.
How do you know that? If the spider is what gives the person their powers, why didn't they just give the spider bite to the baby? How come Ezekiel's spiders gives him clairvoyance, super strength, and the ability to climb walls, but Madam Web only got clairvoyance? Alright, we're like 5 minutes into this movie, and the script is already a complete mess. The movie flashes to modern times, and by modern times I mean 2003, where Cassie is a 30-year-old paramedic. I do find it funny that the movie never explains how baby Cassie got out of the Amazon. Cassie and her coworker are driving a patient to the hospital. Cassie's friend is being played by Adam Scott, who's playing a young Uncle Ben. Now, keep that info in mind as I show you this next clip.
How you doing back there?
You know, last time I was in a vehicle driven like this, I was being shot at.
I wouldn't want you to be homesick for the Army.
Never thought I'd be this happy to be back in Queens.
What, you've never been shot at in Queens?
Uncle Ben, Uncle Ben. Call an ambulance!
When I saw this in theaters, the purpose of this line initially went over my head. Then I realized the line was actually in reference to Uncle Ben getting shot.
Oh, that sucks.
Cassie's character is supposed to be like this awkward loner, so one of the ways the movie tries to show this is by having Cassie awkwardly reject a kid's drawing they made of her as thanks for saving their mom. This scene definitely helps in getting the point across that Cassie's supposed to be awkward, yes, but it's to such an extreme that it comes off as if this is her first human interaction.
She's gonna be okay.
Who?
Patient. Her little boy wanted to say thank you.
You know what? Mr. Ben Parker here did all the work, so...
Just take it. Take it.
No sane adult, awkward or otherwise, is going to deny a drawing from a child, especially with other people around. Even if you have every intention of throwing it out, you at the very least accept it from the child. The following scene, we see Cassie and Ben enjoying their break. There's only one reason I'm bringing up this scene, and it's because of this part right here.
So, I, kind of met someone.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What's this one's name? Oh.
We already know who the woman is he's referring to. It's supposed to be Aunt May. But for some reason, he just won't say her name. This happens again a little bit later, where we see Ben's pregnant sister, Mary Parker, who we obviously know is supposed to be Peter Parker's mom. It's the scene where Mary has all the women at her party try to guess what her baby's name's going to be. No one is able to guess it, so right before Mary tells everyone, a balloon pops with the sound of a fucking gunshot.
Cassie, what's your guess?
Ben?
The name is...
By the time the credits roll, the movie never explicitly tells us who Ben is seeing or the name of Mary's baby. The movie uses the names of other characters in the Spider-Man mythos, but just not Peter Parker or Aunt May. A huge criticism of Tom Holland's MCU Spider-Man is that Uncle Ben is never mentioned. They kept alluding to the character, but he's never explicitly named.
I cannot, no, I cannot do that to her right now. You know? I mean, everything that's happened with her, please.
And then now that I think about it, it's sort of the same case with Mary Jane, too. I mean, Zendaya's MJ is never called Mary Jane Watson. She's like Michelle Jones or something. And also, Harry Osborn isn't in the MCU movies. Oh my god, this all has to do with the contract, doesn't it? My guess is that if Marvel Studios has a character from the Spider-Man mythos that they're using, then I guess Sony Pictures can't, and then that also would work vice versa. Man, I always thought the reason that we never saw Spider-Man's origins, Spider-Man Homecoming, was because the filmmakers recognized that audiences were already accustomed to it, like we didn't need to like tread that ground again. But now I'm starting to think that it's because Marvel Studios literally couldn't do it because of copyright. Whatever the case, the only positive I have from this Mary Parker pregnancy side plot is that I like that they casted Emma Roberts as Peter's mom. At this point in the movie, Cassie has awakened her clairvoyance. For some reason, it required her to go through a cardiac arrest for it to awaken, but whatever. Who knows, maybe Ezekiel had to do the same thing. I'll give the movie this. The sequence in which Cassie awakens her clairvoyance, even though the whole sequence is CGI and you can tell it's CGI, I still think it looks cool. When it comes to depicting a character with clairvoyance in movie or television, I could only really think of one other character, and that was Raven from the old Disney Channel show That's So Raven. Whenever Raven had a premonition, the camera would do like a cool trick where it would spin around her and zoom into her eye. Contrast that with how they depict Cassie having a premonition, and it's just a bombardment of jump cuts and loud noises.
Oh, that sucks.
This next scene is the most egregious the writing gets in terms of spoon-feeding the audience.
Hate to break it to you, Scrooge, but you can't change anything. This isn't gonna change anything. Guess he didn't die after all.
This movie has a really bad tendency to spell out what we as an audience could already interpret. Alright, now let's catch up on Ezekiel. Dude's having visions of 3 spider women killing him someday in the future. As already stated, Ezekiel has clairvoyance just like Madam Web. The strange thing is that with his other powers, it seems that he has full control over them, but when it comes to clairvoyance, this is literally the only premonition he'll have in the entire movie. Basically, as the movie goes, premonitions only happen whenever the writers need the plot to move forward. Ezekiel decides that he needs to kill these girls in the present so that they don't kill him in the future. Okay, now stick with me for this next part, it's another doozy. Ezekiel tracks down an NSA lady at the opera, immediately swoons her by doing this. Then he proceeds to sleep with her, kill her, and take her passcode to the NSA surveillance network. He hires an assistant to use the NSA system to track down these 3 girls, and the reason they're able to track them down is because, and stay with me here, since this vision takes place in the future and they're wearing masks, he uses the NSA surveillance system to remove their masks and de-age them so he'll have a clear image of what they look like now. I mentioned this takes place in 2003, right? Okay, in all honesty, even if it's only used as a convenient plot device, I can suspend my disbelief well enough of the bad guy having access to a security system that can track anyone down anywhere. It's basically the same thing they did in The Dark Knight. Where I can't suspend my disbelief is that Ezekiel's able to conjure up realistic face models of the Spider-Women through some random software, and he does this solely off of how he remembers them from his vision. Okay, as someone who likes to draw, you can't just picture something in your head and be able to perfectly replicate it. You need references. Maybe if these were sketches, I could believe it, but otherwise, this is a hard sell. What program was Ezekiel using to get these realistic renditions of these girls' faces? Was he using Blender? Now, of course, in the real world with disguises like these, anyone would be able to recognize who these women are. But when it comes to superhero movies, audiences are accustomed to the ridiculous disguises like how Superman only needs glasses. I guess in this movie, the NSA system is just that good at decrypting people's identities. In 2003, honestly, the funniest part about this whole scene is that when they de-age the Spider-Women to see what they look like now, the results are that they look exactly the same. I was going to say that it doesn't make too much sense that Ezekiel doesn't try to find another way to stop these Spider-Women from killing him, like maybe stopping them from getting their powers or something, but honestly, his response to immediately try and kill anything that is a threat to him is just his character being consistent.
So much power.
Alright, we've gotten to the part of the movie where the plot finally kicks in. As much as there is to criticize this movie, it does have a solid premise. An awkward loner discovers that she has clairvoyance, and one of her premonitions reveals to her that a random man is going to murder 3 random teenagers. She doesn't know who these girls are, or why the man wants to kill them, but since she's clairvoyant and she sees the future, she is really the only one who can save them. There's a great story that can be told with this premise, and during this train sequence, the movie almost feels like it might turn itself around. It doesn't, but it was nice feeling like it could. Before your brain can ask, like, wait, how did all these characters somehow end up in the same spot at the same time? Isn't that, like, extremely convenient? The movie stops and points out that exact thing, so that makes it okay.
What are the odds of them all being in the same place at the same time?
It's not a coincidence.
There must be something that connects them.
Or something that will. Oh, that sucks.
Cassie has her premonition of the 3 girls being murdered, finally takes action, and is able to get the 3 girls to leave the train before Ezekiel shows up. Her premonition didn't show it, but there isn't really a good reason why she didn't take some kind of precaution of telling the other passengers to get off too. Dude in your vision is randomly killing 3 teenagers, why wouldn't you suspect that he might try to kill the other passengers? After exiting the train but still being noticed by Ezekiel, Ezekiel suits up and, you know what? This costume? Not bad, I like it. I know it's just evil Spider-Man, but its practicality is nice, definitely better than the CGI rubber suit that Tom Holland wears in his MCU movies. Dakota Johnson, in what is a bad line delivery, tells the girls that Ezekiel is after them.
That's your emergency. That.
One of the girls rightly points out,
Is anybody else seeing this?
yeah, why isn't anyone else seeing this? Is the movie really saying that this extra over here like doesn't see the guy in his peripheral vision like right above him? Cassie and the 3 girls almost escape until the cops stop Cassie for abducting 3 girls. Okay, so in the last scene right after the girls exited the train, Sydney Sweeney's character called out for the police over here.
See? This woman's trying to abduct us. What? No, that's not.
But the cops in the scene don't do anything, presumably because they either didn't hear or I guess didn't care. But apparently they did, because now we have a few police officers trying to detain Cassie, which doesn't make sense because there was no attempt by these police officers to come after her. And it doesn't look like they called for backup either. Ezekiel shows up and takes down all the cops on the platform, but doesn't attempt to take out any of the girls for some reason, even though he could perfectly just yoink. This gives the girls enough time to escape. They proceed to steal a taxi from the most oblivious cab driver in New York. I know there's a guy trying to kill them, but is it actually reasonable to try to escape in a stolen cab? Man, this poor guy. After saving their lives, the 3 girls are now more trustful towards Cassie and begin to introduce themselves.
What are your names?
I'm Julia Cornwall.
I'm Anya Corazon.
Maddie Franklin. Thank you for protecting
No,
us.
no, no. I'm not. That's not what's happening here. I'm not protecting you. I am. Your parents can handle this. My parents.
Is at this point I'd like to remind you, these 3 girls are supposed to be teenagers. These actresses are all in their mid-20s. They are not pulling off teenagers. Cassie decides that she wants to drop the girls off with their parents, which I think is reasonable. However, the police have already called an Amber Alert on the 3 girls, with Cassie as the prime suspect.
That was insane. They better lock him up, right? I mean,
She's also the same person police are seeking to question in the possible abduction of the 3 teenage girls. Eyewitnesses have identified the woman in her early 30s. The public has been asked for
what?
Maddie makes an attempt to call her uncle, who's named Jonah, who is definitely a reference to J. Jonah Jameson, but Cassie snatches her phone and throws it out because she suspects it's being tracked.
Hey, you can't do that. She's right.
Okay, this whole scenario is contrived. Being suspicious that your phone is being tracked is, I guess, reasonable if you think the police are the ones doing it since they're currently searching for you. Thing is, Cassie has no plan. She decides she can't let the girls go because, to her, they're the only ones who can prove her innocence. However, I don't think tossing the only one out of the three who has a phone is helping your case. Maybe have the girl hide her phone somewhere. Hell, even putting it behind a random dumpster to come back to would have been better than just letting it get crushed on the street. Alright, we got Cassie and the three girls together here in the woods. Seems like a good time to get some character interactions going, to have the audience kind of build a bit of an attachment, and then as the movie progresses, they might start, typically, they'll start off not liking each other, but through an unexpected kinship will grow to like one another. Cassie just leaves. Julia mentioned that the spider guy was doing spider stuff.
It was like a spider person.
Oh, hey, that's what my mom was researching in the Amazon, and leaves the girls to go back to her apartment to look through her mom's briefcase. Listen, if the movie's not going to put in the effort of having the police already at Cassie's apartment searching for her, as well as not having Cassie try to maybe change her appearance in any way, seriously, I know the red leather coat looks good, but come on, it makes her stand out like a sore thumb. It also would have been nice if the writers at least came up with some good excuse for why Cassie doesn't just bring the girls along with her. One, she shouldn't just fully trust that the girls won't just leave the woods.
You said this was a shortcut.
Two, if they come with her, it would actually be a good way to have some natural exposition, as well as some character interaction. In my head, I'm thinking that maybe the police could have already been at the apartment complex, and the girls and Cassie would need to sneak into Cassie's apartment, and then as Cassie is rummaging for her mother's suitcase, the girls can comment on Cassie's apartment, ask if she's married or single or something, then understand that she's kind of a loner, is able to put everything together. She'll have to explain to the girls everything that's going on, and that would be a natural way to exposit to not only the girls, but to the audience. Instead, we just have Cassie reading this stuff out loud while she's alone in her apartment, which no one does, by the way.
And are incredibly fast, incredibly strong, and they can climb like spiders.
Getting Dakota Johnson to climb the wall because she thinks she might have spider powers, though, I thought that was kind of funny. Back in the woods, the three girls start to interact with one another, and of course, they don't like each other.
You're making the right decision, Julia. You will not like me when I'm angry.
Who says we like you now?
I mean, the conversation between them isn't terrible, but they just don't have any real depth. They're all one-dimensional. This one's smart, this one's rich, and this one is shy, I guess? As time passes by, the girls think that Cassie's taking too long, so the girls ditch and go to a nearby diner. This next sequence is just embarrassing. The girls order some food, and while they're eating, Julia notices a group of high school boys sitting across the diner flirting with her. Maddie convinces all three to go over and dance on top of the table while Britney Spears' Toxic plays in the background.
Let's go. Don't even pretend that you're cooler than Britney. I know you know the words. Come on, get up here.
None of the people working at the diner or any of its customers try to tell them to get the fuck off the table, and we never get any input from the guys at the booth either. Everyone's just watching these three girls do this. A quick tidbit to make this even more funny. So when they filmed this scene, they just did this with no music. One guy at the diner gets a newspaper and starts to read about the missing girls, even though the incident happened less than 10 hours ago. I guess the Daily Bugle is just really fast at printing their stories. The guy gets up and calls the authorities, and this is how Ezekiel is able to track them down. Cassie goes back to the woods, finds that the girls ditched, and follows their trail to the diner. Ezekiel shows up, and as always, as is consistent with his character, starts fucking killing everyone. Honestly, Ezekiel's unapologetic need to kill anything that presents itself as even a minor threat is unironically the best part of this movie. Cassie shows up and tries to intervene, but Ezekiel proceeds to kill two of the girls and then Cassie. Except he doesn't, because it was all one of Cassie's premonitions. Now, knowing that Ezekiel is going to show up, Cassie decides to prepare, and by doing so, she rams the cab into the diner. This allows Cassie and the girls to escape. Cassie drives herself and the girls to a motel. This next scene is actually okay. Cassie still wants to try and drop the girls off with their parents, but each of them reveal why she can't just do that.
My mom's in a psych ward. She didn't really cope well after my dad left, and so I got sent to live with him and his new family, and I don't think that they want me there.
My parents aren't around either. I think they resent how having a kid messed up their lives. I don't think they're gonna fly back from China to deal with this, and I really don't want to find out, so.
It's just me and my dad. Except he never told me he didn't have his papers, so I've just been living by myself in our apartment since then. Until I'm 18, I can't exist. And there's no way I'm getting deported to, or going into the foster system.
foster system isn't always that terrible. Things didn't turn out so bad for me.
Right.
We're finally getting some character bonding between the heroine and the 3 damsels that she has to save. In terms of character bonding, we are eating crumbs, but god damn it, it's something. Also, this scene definitely would have worked a lot better if Dakota Johnson was actually talking to teenagers. Ezekiel uses telepathy to communicate to Cassie in her sleep, where he exposition dumps literally everything to Cassie.
No one survives once enough poison enters their system. You won't be so lucky next time. I need to stop them from killing me. In the future, I've become much more. In the future, they will destroy me and everything I've built.
How come you get to decide?
Because I'm the one with the powers. The only thing I know is that in the future, they also have powers.
The girls? The girls have powers in the future.
Mother underestimated me. The power of the spider. Don't make the same mistake.
The writers aren't even trying to present these ideas organically. Where the fuck did this ability come from, and how come Ezekiel only used it on Cassie? Is it because they both have the spider's DNA or some bullshit? And why would he tell her anything? Alright, so Cassie was just told that the bad guy can inject a neurotoxin throughout someone's body simply by touching them. This would lead to the heart stopping. Now, I'm all for everyone having the basic knowledge of how to do CPR, but Cassie's motivation in teaching these girls derives from the idea that she thinks if anyone gets poisoned by Ezekiel, basic CPR could bring them back to life. Personally, and maybe I'm wrong, but if a neurotoxin is coursing throughout your body and stops your heart, I don't think CPR is bringing you back. Okay, this movie is coming up on its climax, so what do you think is going to happen next? Obviously, the next thing that Cassie should do is ditch the girls on Uncle Ben and fly out to Peru for a week. You probably have some questions, but the most important one you should be asking is, how did they contact Ben without being tracked by Ezekiel? When I had watched this movie in theaters, I was genuinely curious as to where the hell the story would be going if the writers felt the need to have Madame Web go to Peru this late in the movie. I get the reasoning behind it so that Cassie can find some answers, but really? We're ditching the girls again? For a story premise about a woman with clairvoyance who is the only one who can save these 3 girls from being murdered, it sure is strange how the writers keep separating the heroine from who she's supposed to be saving. Not to mention, Cassie is a wanted suspect. How the fuck is she getting on a plane to travel to Peru? Again, let me remind you, this movie takes place in 2003. That is only 2 years after one of the most significant terrorist attacks that have ever happened in the United States.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Holy shit.
Oh my god.
That's incredible.
Is that funny?
Security would be on her ass. In the next scene, we see Cassie in Peru. I don't know how deep this is into the Amazon forest, but I would think that maybe if you had to travel even a little bit, you'd be kind of sweating. Alright, whatever the case, the white guy from the beginning finds Cassie and takes her to the cum pool. This next sequence is hilarious.
Why did you hate me so much?
Thank you.
Sorry to tell you that your baby has myasthenia gravis. It's a genetic neuromuscular disorder.
But I don't have a neuromuscular disorder.
Life expectancy. There are some promising leads in the Amazon.
That's why you went there? For me?
I'm unwilling to accept a diagnosis of helplessness. And I'm not going to teach my daughter to either.
You did it. You did it.
You did it! Congratulations!
Man, you can tell that Dakota Johnson was just not trying at this point. Okay, for context, white guy pushes Cassie in the cum pool, and she has an Aaron Yeager moment where she's viewing events from the past that she wasn't there for in person, but her mom was. Cassie finds out that her mother was researching spiders in the hope of finding a cure for what would have been Cassie's neurological muscle disorder. This is how Dakota Johnson responds to that news. Come on, this is like a level of not trying that is unacceptable from a high-paying actress. One of the few things that this movie is trying to do with Cassie's character is that she has a resentment towards her mother, because as far as she knew, her mom died being more dedicated to her work than taking care of the child she was bearing. Now, with a better script, this idea could have been conveyed more, because as it stands, when Cassie peers into the past and we see her pregnant mom get a little annoyed by her baby giving her cramps, it comes off as so strange when Cassie says,
Why Why did you hate me so much?
Thank you.
From what's been presented, Cassie should feel indifferent towards her mother. This emotional twist that, oh, the mom wasn't just dedicated to her work because she was like a workaholic. She actually was doing all this for her daughter or whatever. This doesn't work because, well, for one, it wasn't set up that well, and two, it wasn't even set up in a way to make the audience care. Also, in the beginning of the movie, Cassie's mom says she's searching for these spiders because they could provide a cure to thousands of diseases. From the audience's perspective, the mom hasn't done anything wrong. Trying to find some kind of cure or treatment for thousands of diseases is just objectively good. So I don't know why the movie would try to have this emotional twist when the setup for it already doesn't have the audience bought into Cassie's perspective on her mom. All that said, I thought the cum pool was going to be the plot device that helps Cassie control her powers. It's not. This entire trip was just for Cassie to have her Eren Yeager moment and forgive her mom, I guess. Now she's going to travel all the way back to New York with no new abilities or newfound way to control her powers, though she eventually will because the script will say so. Also, fuck this movie, they butchered the responsibility line again.
And when you take on the responsibility, great power will come.
Oh, that sucks.
The responsibility line was said in No Way Home, so again, my guess is that they couldn't say it because of the contract. As Cassie flies back to New York, the following scene we see Mary Parker go into labor.
Either I peed myself or my water broke.
Even though she wasn't supposed to be due for another 4 weeks. I don't know what it is with this movie with having pregnant women give birth early, but seems to be a consistent theme. Ben needs to drive Mary to the hospital, so what does he do with the girls? Where he was explicitly told by Cassie to keep them hidden? That's right, he tells the girls to come along with them, and they do so because the writers are just that bad at their job. I mean, to be fair, we're at the climax, baby. Characters can't have logic and reasoning now. Cassie arrives at the house, finds that no one's home, peeks through the window, and then has a premonition. The premonitions are random, so why not just write Cassie having one as she comes back into New York? Why does Cassie have to see the remains of a pregnant woman's broken water leakage on the floor to activate her premonition? It's just kind of weird. Cassie then proceeds to steal an amulet, even though she still has the cab from the beginning of the movie. Cassie's premonition showed that Ezekiel would kill Ben, Mary, and the girls with some sort of grenade. Okay, I can believe Cassie being able to pinpoint their location from the surrounding environment of her premonition, but her solution to stop Ezekiel is to drive through a sign from a second-story building, which just happens to work in Cassie's favor as she doesn't run over Ben or anyone else's vehicle, but is able to hit Ezekiel head-on, because as we can see from this clip, he jumps right in front of the ambulance. Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a couple pages missing from the script and they kind of just relied on the CGI and VFX team to just, connect two sequences together. Because, there's no way this was said on set, right? There's no way that, the initial thing in the script was oh, yeah, so Cassie's gonna drive through a sign from a second-story building, and she's gonna hit Ezekiel. But because it's a little off, Ezekiel will jump and, get in the way of the ambulance and get hit on accident. There's no way that's in the script. Cassie takes the three girls and escapes to a fireworks factory. This is where Cassie's clairvoyance becomes the most convenient plot device. And it could be excused if the cum pool was the reason she was now able to control her powers, but as far as the movie suggests, Cassie still doesn't have control over her clairvoyance. It just decides to be very helpful in this circumstance. Cassie and the girls set off all the fireworks, the power of which somehow blows a hole in the wall and it allows them to escape to the roof. Now, Cassie is bringing the girls to the roof because her clairvoyance showed her that there would be a helicopter waiting for them. Sure, I can believe it. However, I don't think I can believe the idea of this fireworks building having a giant Pepsi Cola sign on its roof. What's worse, or funnier, is that this sign is about to play a crucial role in this climax. Fireworks are going off and blowing pieces of shrapnel everywhere. Cassie's clairvoyance conveniently shows her where the shrapnel is about to hit, so she's able to guide the girls away by taking a piece of shrapnel and using it as a shield like Captain America or something. The music swells and it's supposed to be a big hero moment for Cassie, but the execution just kind of comes off as embarrassing. The next few minutes are an incoherent mess as Cassie tries bringing the girls to the top of the Pepsi sign so that they can be picked up by the helicopter. The camera keeps cutting back and forth on different angles and it's all handheld, so the whole sequence is very disorienting. Ezekiel catches up, and instead of trying to kill one of the three girls, as it's his entire character, he focuses on pinning down Cassie, which is conveniently when Cassie awakens a new power, which basically allows her to make shadow clones. Cassie is able to be at multiple places at once and saves each girl from falling. And again, instead of trying to kill them, Ezekiel focuses on Cassie. Maybe Cassie also awakened super strength because she takes this punch like a champ. I know I'd be fucking wheezing if I was punched like this. Ezekiel continues to focus on Cassie, and in doing so, Cassie's clairvoyance shows her that if she leads Ezekiel close enough, a pea from the giant Pepsi sign will crush him dead. That is so funny that Pepsi fucking saves the day. Ezekiel continues to focus Cassie, and in doing so, Cassie's clairvoyance shows her that if she leads Ezekiel close enough, the giant pea from the giant Pepsi sign will crush him to death. I can't believe I just fucking said that. What the fuck is this movie? The plan works and Ezekiel dies. But oh wait, Cassie's clairvoyance decides to stop working and doesn't show her falling into the river. Cassie falls into the river while shrapnel of the building is like being fired off everywhere, and she just doesn't really seem to try to swim up or anything. Very strange. Now this next part is just funny. A firework shoots into the river and it hits Cassie in the face. In doing so, it makes Cassie like actually drown. Sydney Sweeney dives in to save her, and hey, the Chekhov's gun of CPR comes back as the girls perform CPR to save Cassie. The following scene, we see Mary has given birth to a baby whose name we'll truly never know. However, instead of giving us a name, the way this movie implies that it's baby Peter Parker is with this bird's eye view of the room that then refocuses on this hospital curtain because I guess it kind of looks like a spider web? Couldn't have gotten a set designer to go down to the dollar store and buy some fake cobwebs. Would have been better than this. Next, we see the girls with Cassie in her hospital room. And man, I gotta show you this next clip.
Ben said to tell you that the baby's doing really well. And he's loving being an uncle.
Yeah, all the fun and none of the responsibility.
That's what he thinks.
Oh, that sucks.
Okay, so somehow Cassie is now full on Madam Web, which means she can see into the future. This line implies that she knows Ben is going to die in the future and that his death will cause Peter to become Spider-Man. Canonically, Ben dies, so Cassie is cool with saving 3 random strangers but not her, like, only friend? I'm just saying, man, if I had an uncle who had a friend who could have prevented his death, I would be pissed. This ending is also implying that Madam Web is aware of, like, every future catastrophe, but it's definitely going to be like a Captain America Endgame situation where she just won't do anything to stop those events from happening. The movie then also tries to imply that Cassie now has a kinship with these 3 girls, but I'm sorry, this movie has not earned that. There was like 1 or 2 pretty okay character building scenes, but you're going to need a lot more than this. The girls being chummy with each other is at least a little more believable. In the final scene of the movie, we see Cassie in an apartment with a stellar view of New York. How she's able to afford this? No idea. She's now blind and wheelchair bound, so she's definitely not working as a paramedic anymore. Becoming blind from a firework hitting her face, I get, but why the fuck is she in a wheelchair? Wait, is that why she didn't attempt to swim up? Because she somehow became paralyzed before falling into the water? But then how did that happen? Whatever, the movie's almost over. The girls come over to hang with Cassie. The scene is supposed to be cute as Cassie uses her clairvoyance to say what the girls are going to say before they say it, or say bless you before one of them sneezes.
Take out? But we didn't
Kung
know.
Pao chicken is perfect.
How'd you know?
Bless you, Anya.
What? Thank you.
Wait, do you hear that? Here, I'll play it again. And really listen to the soundtrack this time.
Can you see us in the future?
Yes. I can see you. Stand.
No fucking way. Come on, Sony, you stole this from the Spider-Man PS4 game. The movie ends with Madam Web peeking into the future, showing us how at some point, someday, these girls become Spider-Women. Based off the trailer, I wouldn't have blamed anyone going into this movie thinking they were going to see these girls become Spider-Women, but I guess Sony thought they had a franchise starter on their hands and expected audiences to want to come back for a sequel. The final shot of this movie is this. This is CW quality put on the big screen. $80 million. Like, this is actually unacceptable, man. Then the movie ends, but not before stealing a shot from Spider-Man 2. Time for questions that Madam Web left unanswered. Aren't Cassie and the girls wanted by local authorities? Whatever happened to that plot point? Why do the Spider-Women in the future kill Ezekiel? I mean, we know he's a bad dude, but what does he do specifically in the future that eventually leads to the Spider-Women going after him? And for the last question, and also the most important, why the fuck did they make this movie? This is like actually a catastrophe. A complete mess. A movie that was so obviously tampered with by the studio and became a Frankenstein monster of what it was originally supposed to be. And that's the thing. As bad as this movie turned out, I do believe there was maybe a good movie in here somewhere. The idea of making a superhero movie that's more psychological thriller than action-adventure is a good spin on the genre. Now, unless we get an official confirmation about what this movie was originally supposed to be, we'll just have to go off rumors that apparently this movie was originally about Ezekiel trying to kill baby Peter Parker and that Cassie and the girls came together to stop him. You can tell by early cast and crew interviews that this movie had a drastically different script before they started production. Is this the worst movie ever? Definitely not. Is it the worst superhero movie ever? I wouldn't say that either. This movie isn't good, but to its credit, it's not boring, which is possibly the worst thing a movie could be. Madam Web is a movie that is so bad, it's good, especially if you're drinking, which I recommend. I hope the results of Madam Web help signifies the end of the Spider-Man spin-off movie universe. There's a Venom 3 and Kraven movie still on the horizon, and I expect those will be just as bad as the rest of these spin-off movies, but will they be as entertaining as Madam Web? Oh, hey, I think I just realized what the P from the giant Pepsi sign is supposed to stand for. It stands for, Madam Web is pretty bad. Studio executives at Sony have to have some sort of godlike hubris. Hubris. Ezekiel continues to focus on Cassie, and in doing so, Cassie's clairvoyance shows her that if she leads Ezekiel... Fuck. Pepsi Man. They should have made a movie about Pepsi Man. It would have done... What? Actually, legit, why haven't they made a movie about Pepsi Man? I feel like that would actually be... I'm getting off track. I need to fucking finish my script. Ezekiel continues to focus... Yeah, fuck, this is so funny. I'm sweating. Oh my god. This is like 4 hours in this fucking closet.